Great. Well, welcome everybody to our work session tonight. This will be our official call to order. We actually only have one agenda item, and it's a kind of a special presentation by the Recognizing Enslaved Africans in Irvington Committee.
So I'm promoting. Let's see, Sarah Cox. Hold on one second.
Assume that's Sarah.
Yes. Okay. We'll wait till they. Sarah, well, they're both muted.
They're both on mute, at least.
Yep. Ah, there we go. Okay, we can wait.
A little technical support there.
All right. You can.
Do you unmute her, Larry?
No, but I can ask. Here we go.
There you go.
Okay.
Yes.
There.
All right. So is there anyone else that you want promoted to be, on the panel for your presentation here?
Yes, Lisa again and Arlene Burgos.
Okay. Okay, so, and. Okay.
Let's see.
Just wait a second there.
It's and Lisa again.
Yeah.
She's here.
That's Lisa there. Yep.
Lisa, she moved.
Well, there she is.
She followed you up. I lost her too.
Okay. Okay. So if you
Lisa's still on mute.
yes.
So is Arlene.
Okay, there. Okay.
Okay.
They did that by choice, but maybe not.
Yeah, maybe. So do you want the screen shared so the presentation is shown, or do you want to talk first? You tell me. So I'm ready to share the presentation anytime.
Oh, sure. Let me just say thank you so much for inviting us to be at this work session. As you know, this has been a long process, 2 years. Kathy Sears and I founded this organization, or this committee, about 2 years ago, and we've been meeting countless hours to try to figure out ways with our committee of how to commemorate and acknowledge slavery in Irvington. We've done a ton of research. We've given presentations. We have myriad publications and newspaper articles. So thank you very much. I feel like this is great, this sort of culminating moment, sort of to begin the next phase. So yeah, I'll just say that I also have been an employee at Historic Hudson Valley for 17 years as a costumed interpreter with Phillipsburg Manor. And so I am a historian. And I would just love for Arlene and Lisa just to say a couple of sentences about their background and their membership with this committee.
Lisa, I guess I can start. My name is Arlene Burgos. I've been living in Irvington for about 9 years now, and I co-chair the Diversity and Inclusion Committee in the PTSA. And some time ago, I met with Sarah and was asked to sort of help on the committee and sort of give and talk about a little bit about inclusion, I would say, right, of others in this process. And so I'm happy to be here, and thank you for giving us this opportunity.
So my name is Lisa again, and I am a member of this committee. I've been a member of it for quite a while and have been very privileged to work with Sarah and Kathy and others, and to sort of be in the front row to their research and be able to kind of offer my thoughts as the work has gone along. I'm also a member of Irvington Activists and of the Irvington Democratic Committee, so I've been quite involved in Irvington since I got here 4 years ago. And I'm also involved with Arlene in the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. So I think there's a really important crossover between the commemoration and recognition we'll be discussing tonight and the lessons that children are learning in Irvington schools. I think that's really important to continue to bear in mind. So very honored to be here with you tonight and looking forward to helping to make this presentation.
Okay, thank you. All right, Larry, so you can go ahead and put up that PowerPoint.
Okay. So just tell me when you want anything advanced.
I will. Yes, you
all right.
can advance this. Okay, so we're just going to cut right to the chase. We do have 2 recommendations, and then we're going to sort of deconstruct these 2 recommendations with the who and the where in just a minute. But I'm just going to go ahead and read it. This committee recommends that the trustees approve the installation of art to be designed by Vinnie Bagwell and an accompanying educational plaque in an area of prominence and honor on Main Street. And the second recommendation is this committee recommends that the trustees install a plaque near the purported enslaved African burial ground. So you can advance it, Larry. So why Vinnie Bagwell? I don't know if anybody has had a chance or taken a look at any of Vinnie Bagwell's art. It's quite masterful. You can always just go to VinnieBagwell.com where you get a tremendous amount of information. She's a leading artist, activist, and educator who has won prestigious commissions all over the country, bringing to light this important part of our collective history. Vinnie's figurative art expresses humanity and thus invites a visceral connection between the viewer and this important subject. Vinnie's art should attract sizable art grants. Vinnie's art will help make Irvington a destination for local slavery acknowledgement. And we have visited Vinnie several times at her Yonkers studio, and we have viewed all sizes of her artwork, and we have fomented a relationship, as she could be an ally in this process with us. So I just want to say that there is something called the Westchester African American Heritage Trail. It has 14 sites. Soon it will have 15 sites. The 15th site is going to be down at the Yonkers waterfront, and it is the enslaved African rain garden, where Vinnie's beautiful 5 life-size statues and educational plaques are going to be down at the waterfront. Another one of the stops on this heritage trail is the Villa Lawaro. So people do get in their car and they go to these 14 places, sort of ending up at Irvington. But then Villa Lawaro, of course, is closed to the public. So if by any chance the trustees do agree to artwork by Vinnie on our Main Street, it will be a continuation of this heritage trail that many people take. Another one of the spots anyway on the heritage trail is Aretha Franklin down in Yonkers, one of her statues. Okay, so we can go to the next one. So these are just samples. This happens to be one of the statues in the smaller form. It is now a life-size statue that's going to be down at the Yonkers waterfront. So she has everything from 6-foot life-size statues all the way down to bas-relief. So this is an example of a 3rd scale bronze sculpture. So we recommend that trustees consider 2 options for Vinnie's art. One option is this 1/3 scale bronze sculpture. It's 26 inches tall. That would be placed on a pedestal. It can be produced for an estimated $25,000 to $30,000, but the price does not include the pedestal by the artist, the cement foundation, or the excavation and removal of the paving. But I just wanted you to see that this gives a very beautiful example of her artwork. Okay, you can go to the next slide. And this is a sample of one of her bas-relief sculptures. So this is 20 by 30 inches. She can make it larger as well. This can be adhered to a wall or a freestanding stone slab. And this can be produced for approximately $10,000. But the pricing, of course, depends on the enlargement size. Again, you can see her beautiful work. Okay, next slide. Okay, and here I'm going to ask that Arlene talk about this one.
Sure. So I think one of the important pieces of the sort of the preservation of history, and I think it's important not only just her artwork, which is beautiful, but the educational and the commemorative plaque that would be placed there. And I think that the words that are chosen and the history that is sort of that story that's told is really critical in terms of this commemoration and sort of recognition of history. So Paul Ficalora of the Irvington, I hope I didn't butcher that name, of the Irvington Landmarks Preservation Inc. has agreed to facilitate the installation of an educational and commemorative plaque to be placed adjacent to the art. And I think the language, again, just to highlight the importance of the language and what's conveyed there, I think is something that for the committee is important to really sort of be careful with the words that it chooses and to invite sort of part of maybe why I'm here too, was inviting the Inclusion and Diversity Committee to sort of look at the language along with the African American History of Westchester 400 Commemoration Committee, just to make sure that, when you have sort of a piece of art and you're trying to commemorate sort of historical events, that the language is appropriate, in meaning and tone, and that we understand that for people viewing this, it's a teachable moment. And I think it's important to know that given, sort of the rally on Sunday, that sort of this idea of what is Irvington's history and, sort of what are the pieces of Black history that are here. So I think it could be really important for our town to, to sort of be at the forefront of that and understand how important this history is to the people of Irvington and the people who visit the site.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Larry. And Lisa is going to talk about the importance of location. She's
Sorry.
on.
This is the third piece. So first we have the sculpture, and that's sort of the visual, the artistic, the visceral impact that sculpture would have. And then second, we have the language on the plaque, which obviously needs to be carefully tailored, as Arlene talked about, to be this incredible teaching resource and to be a completion of history. But I think equally important is the location because of the message that sends. And I think it's a matter both of recognizing Black history, but also of recognizing that this is a collective history as well. And so a placement that is central, that's central in the village, really shows that this is all of our history. And so it's not something that sort of is relegated to the side or as a footnote, but it's something that's just as prominent as all other renderings and representations of history that we see around the village. So I'll read this now and then I'll make a couple of other notes. So why Main Street for the artwork and plaque? Main Street is where we proudly display our historical monuments, such as the war memorials and the Rip Van Winkle statue. Last year, a granite plaque was installed in Veterans Plaza to commemorate the local patriots of the Revolutionary War. This was thoroughly researched by Connie, and a moving ceremony and tribute to their historic importance was well attended. Sidewalk plaques highlighting the lives of the Irvington citizens whose names appear on our street signs will be installed later this summer. The long ignored history of enslaved Africans is of equal historical importance, and as such merits a prominent location on Main Street. The prominent placement of this monument to these enslaved Africans is critical in order to serve as a contextual and educational counterpoint to the existing display of Irvington founders' history. So again, the Irvington citizens whose names appear on our street signs, the plaques that will highlight those lives, we now know thanks to the research that Kathy and Sarah have done, that these were mostly people who owned enslaved Africans. And so it's really important for the commemoration and the recognition of that history to be placed in a way that allows that juxtaposition to happen, and for people to have that kind of click and aha moment that this was the reality of the founding of this village. And, I should say, kind of related to the point that I made about education, I recently learned, I don't know if this is true for all Irvington students, that at least some Irvington students are able to go through their whole education here and not really appreciate that slavery had happened in the North, and that New York State was in fact a capital of the slave trade. There are some students who still learn that the Civil War was fought only over economic issues and geography. So there's some missing links for kids in their education. And I think placing this artwork and plaque in a central location sends a really clear message that this is, again, that this is history, full stop, and that it has to be understood in its whole complexity, and that these things are of equal importance to the village. And, I second what Arlene said about just the incredible turnout at the rally on Sunday. And I think there's a real appetite in this community for having centrally located, not fringe conversations, but really prominent and public conversations about these issues. And that takes me to the next slide about where that could take place. So we're on Main Street. We're recommending that the trustees consider locating the art and the plaque in front of Village Hall. This place of honor would allow for an accessible space for commemorative activities or quiet contemplation. And I think we just saw on Sunday at the rally, those Village Hall steps, that was the place where people stood to make their speeches. And it was really powerful to hear them, hear those speeches emanate from this place of prominence in the village, the place that represents sort of the entirety of the community and obviously our government. So we really recommend that that's the appropriate placement to be accessible and to allow for all of the kinds of activities that might surround it, whether they're educational or commemorative or just people engaging in a quiet way with the artwork and the plaque.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, we can take a breath and we're going to go on to the second plaque. So for those of you who have attended one of our presentations, Kathy and I sort of researched using old sources where an enslaved African burial ground might have been located on the property of Buckouts. So it's basically, if you're standing in front of the Eileen Fisher Renew store and you're looking east, you look over South Buckout Street, look over the Barney Brook, and that sort of little wooded half acre, that's basically where this burial ground was. So this committee recommends that the trustees consider installing a much smaller plaque near the purported enslaved African burial ground on the east side of South Buckout Street, across from Eileen Fisher's Renew store. Members of this committee led tours to this burial ground during the 2018 Celebrate Irvington Day. And it was a solemn and moving tours, which included history, poetry, music, and storytelling. Again, Paul Ficalora has agreed to facilitate the installation of this commemorative plaque. And we are also working on proposed language for the plaque, which will include the iconic enslaved African burial symbol known as a Sankofa. So you can go to the next slide, Larry. So we're on South Buckout. So this committee is recommending that the trustees consider embedding a plaque into the standing stone wall adjacent to the grassy area overlooking the purported burial ground. Again, it would allow for accessible space for commemorative activities, whether it's educational or quiet contemplation. Okay, next slide. So this is just a sample I found on the internet of an African burial ground plaque. As you can see, it's embedded there into the stone wall. Okay, the next slide. So after all that, so what are we all sort of thinking about for next steps? Well, we're suggesting that we invite Vinnie Bagwell to a future trustee work meeting to discuss various art options, her process, the pricing of her art, project administration. I do have more details in an appendices of this PowerPoint on slides 15 through 17. We would like to decide on a site for this commemorative art and the educational plaque. We'd like to decide on the site for the enslaved African burial ground plaque. We're going to finalize the plaque language and design. And we also need to identify a 501c3 for online contributions and for administration of this. We've been in conversations with the Irvington Historical Society, and while they are more than happy to accept checks, and they've even created a discrete account for these projects and for contribution and fundraising, they are unable at this time to receive any online contributions, nor are they willing at this point to solicit or administer this project, solicit funds online or administer this project. So we can go on to the next slide. So the appendices, it's really just, we can go on at our own leisure anytime later. The description of who we are, public education and press coverage. Yeah, so it's basically that we're Irvington activists, Irvington Historical Society, Board of Education, Architectural Review Board, Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and a journalist, and various community historians and teachers. So go to another slide. I want to see where Vinnie Bagwell, okay, we can go to another slide. Now this is what I was talking about. This gives a little more information about Vinnie Bagwell's art commissions. So as you can see, it's 100 grand for 6 feet tall, 40 to 50 for 3/4 bust size. So the two options that we were giving were the 1/3 scale bronze and the bas relief. Okay, you can go to the next slide. This is her work schedule. It's basically about a year. We can look at this another time in more detail, hopefully with Vinnie. We can go to another slide. This is what I want to get to. So Vinnie Bagwell has the Enslaved Africans Rain Garden, is actually a 501c3. And in my conversations with her, she said that she could be the 501c3 administrator of this project. So she would be able to solicit and accept donations. But again, we can also see if there's another option, whether the village has an option that we can use as well. So Larry, we can go back to the slide. Let's see what number it is, where we can sort of have our to-do list. Let's see, that is slide number 12. Okay, so we could just start with the very first one. Do we agree that we would like to invite Vinnie to a future meeting to talk about her various art options and pricing?
On me.
Yeah, okay, so I'll work with Larry on that. We can, and we'll be in touch with Vinnie, and we can also, oh, I guess we're not taking ourselves down to her studio anytime soon. Okay.
Let me
So
just
then-
say, I'm a little bit concerned that we've already put the cart ahead of the horse, saying that we're not even sure exactly what sort of commission we'd be considering. I think that you gave general framework in terms of cost. I think the next thing to do is the board needs to discuss with itself, you know, issues related to what it is we're trying to do in terms of public monuments. How does it fit with the Village Hall Plaza redevelopment that's gone on? How it fits with the other projects like what I call the Alphabet City plaques, Alphabet Street plaques. So there's things going on that we need to talk about. I don't think we can just go through this list and say, in this meeting, I'm not willing to agree to anything out of this meeting. I'm willing to agree to the general concept. I think it's a great concept. I'm not willing to say we should bring the artist up immediately to visit with us. I think we should have a chance as a board to talk amongst ourselves about what it is we think the next steps really should be at this point.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. These are just recommendations for your consideration.
Oh, but you're trying to get us to agree to it on the spot. And I'm saying I'm not willing to agree to anything on the spot. I agree to the general concept of commemoration of the African slave history of the village. But beyond that, I'm concerned that we actually step back and consider what it is we're looking to do to serve that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Does anyone else agree with that, or am I just speaking out of turn?
I guess well, first of all, Sarah, Lisa, all of you, I mean, I obviously applaud the amount of work and research. I don't count myself as an actual historian, and actually it was Eric who did the research. I just nudged him. So, I mean, I happen to be familiar with Binnie Bagwell myself. I've certainly spent hours and hours with her. I've been there. I've dealt with, you know, doing an event in Yonkers where she was one of the speakers. So I certainly believe she's very qualified, as you've said. But I mean, I have to agree with Mark that our usual process is, you know, we listen. We're like really good at listening to all of you who are speaking, and then kind of step back and say, okay, what's our next piece of this? What's our usual process of moving forward to vet an idea? And so I guess I would say that one of our usual processes is to have several trustees meet with you or your designee and bring in some other people and kind of vet it out to see where it goes. I mean, that's the kind of thing we often do. So
Sounds perfect.
you know, as I recall from our last meeting, this board is, I guess, as Mark put it, in concept, very interested and wanting to do some kind of commemoration. And I hope I don't sound like a bureaucrat. It's a horrible thing that happens when you've been in government for 12 years. But I would say, you know, it's not up to me, but, you know, we often have a couple of trustees, you know, the idea people, and then bringing in others to kind of vet the whole thing out. So
Sounds good.
that's where I would be. I certainly advise people to go see the statues. They were in the Yonkers library lobby the last time I was there. Oh no, you can't go to the library yet, but maybe you can go to a library's lobby soon. So I don't know. I don't want to speak that much, but you know, my colleagues certainly have their point of view. And
I had a slightly different take. To me, we don't have another work session until July. So if the artist can't make it then, it's not till August. So to me, we could have worked out a lot of those details in the next 4 weeks to 8 weeks to 12 weeks. So to me, trying to get the artist schedule is going to be difficult anyway. So to me, I wasn't worried about kind of doing the legwork before she got here. So, but I'm happy to put the brakes on it too. It's, you know, I don't think we're in any super rush here. Our history is not going to change, so we can take our time. But
I think that's precisely the question, Brian. I think it's not critical to rush ahead. I think we do have I know it sounds silly, but I feel like we have limited real estate around Village Hall, and we need to think about what it is. I mean, just on the face of it, I'm much more inclined to like the idea of a plaque and a bas-relief than I am a freestanding sculpture. But that's just because I think it's easier to put that into place and not affect the space of the plaza itself. So, and I'm just pointing that out because there's going to be a lot of people or things upcoming over time that are going to want to try to make use of Village Hall Plaza. So we have, we should look at that as a resource, not just as an open-ended frontier to start using. But again, that's just, one opinion.
I'll weigh in too. And Kathy and Sarah, I've spoken to both of you and been so supportive of your work with what you did for the Roost, and have spread that around and informed other people of it. I love the idea of this. We should absolutely acknowledge the history that you have so carefully researched and underscored. But there's a lot of traffic on Main Street. We're talking about different kinds of plaques for different sorts of things, and we want to get this right. We want to make sure that the balance, the size, the presentation, the prominence is right. And it's worthwhile, I think, to take a little bit more time to take a broader view of it with the knowledge that we absolutely support this project. It's a question of getting it right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll weigh in just for a second. I generally agree with what I've heard, specifically with what I think is Connie's suggestion, that the board as a group sort of meet to discuss this and perhaps get one or two trustees to agree to be liaison directly with this committee. I think sooner rather than later.
Yes.
I don't want to rush this concept, but I was so impressed with your presentation, which is now over a year ago. And, I'm not blaming you for it taking this long for you to get to us, but I think that we can, I agree with Brian in that I think over the next 4 to 8 weeks, we can certainly, come to some level of agreement with the board, with a number of trustees meeting with your committee, and then reporting back to the board and sort of getting an agreement as to where we go with that.
Sure. Yeah, well, we would certainly welcome that. I was not suggesting that any of those decisions would be made at all in this evening. I was just throwing them out there as suggestions for contemplation, and we will happily work with any number of the board to see if we can, come up with a clearer picture.
So,
Thank you again for doing this essential work. This was, I think, eye-opening for so many people in this village to understand this history. So thank you.
I had one question on the burial ground area. Is that village property, or is that like county property? Who owns that property where the burial
Isn't
ground?
that private property?
I think
We
it's
found
right.
last time.
Well, so from my recollection, certainly the part of that picture that was showing the wooded area, that's not village property. That's private property. But I believe that the area to the west of Barney Brook, between Barney Brook and South Buckout Street, so the sidewalk area, there's some real estate to the east of the sidewalk. So between the sidewalk and Barney Brook,
And the
there's some
retaining
real
wall,
estate.
right?
Yeah, and that wall, and I believe that's village property. Although, I mean, I'd have to look at a survey. Yep.
See, one thing I could
A
envision,
historic wall in any way?
I don't know.
one thing I can envision in that section is I think that that has to be thought about is I think there might have to be more construction than just a plaque applied to the wall, because what I'd hate to see is the plaque become like down at ground level. You know what I mean? It should have some prominence in that area. So we have to figure that out. And it might be a modification to the wall itself if we own it, so that it can be like the example you showed, pulled up and made more prominent. I think it'd be sad to waste that kind of a, situational presentation without really making it count.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's sacred ground. So it's like, I think that site to me is, we don't want that to be like kind of the footnote piece either. I think we want to make that as prominent as possible, because that is actually the final resting place, So to me, that's, we don't want to just, put a little plaque, and as Mark said, kind of have it near ground level so no one ever notices it. So yeah, I think it's, I like kind of the subtle thing as well, because it's kind of, sometimes there's beauty in subtlety, but I think it's that fine line between acknowledging that place in a way that's appropriate for being the final resting place of the kind of the forgotten almost. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well said. If you remember, I mean, Mark will remember this, but what was called Earth Day 40 had a part of that celebration was at that spot, and some trees were planted there. Mark, do you remember this?
Yeah, the trees are still there.
Yeah, and it was kind of cleaned up, and you could see the wall better. And I recall because Andrea Stewart Cousins came to that. It was cold, and Petra Candace and I stood there, and we talked about Earth Day 40, and all those things that you think are going to take a little bit of time, and that was, what year was that? Because we just did Earth Day 50, didn't we? Wasn't it 10 years ago? Anyway, just a little, but it was actually a lovely place. And I think, Mark, your idea is good, but we don't, yeah. So I guess we can decide at some point, what two people want to, if we can't do more than two people on the board meeting together. That's why people say two, because otherwise it's a public meeting. So, I mean, people could switch around, but however we proceed in the next, I think this idea of, by 8 weeks from now, we ought to have a pretty good sense of what might happen. So we don't have to decide now.
Sorry, we're also talking about signage, gateway signage by the train station coming into the village. And certainly if we decide to go ahead with this and, get the location set, that would certainly be something we would want to direct people to.
I think important. One thing that Brian said, if I may, and maybe Sarah, you have an idea on this. He said it should be treated as hallowed ground, or is hallowed ground, depending on how you want to phrase it. But it's not under public control. It's part of what used to be the Peppermint House, before it got painted on the other side of Barney Brook, the large Victorian. So I guess that used to be the judge's house, right, or something?
That was Judge Eckers, yeah.
Judge Eckers. So my concern is, one thing we could do as an offshoot, not as a delay or anything else, but just maybe try to come up with some ideas where we could, in fact, try to protect that land. It may be protected from development just by the nature of what it is, how small it is, and all the
water and everything, yeah.
The watercourse buffer and all that stuff. But in any case, we should sort of look at if we could make that somehow a more, I don't know, what, publicly protected. I don't know what the right words are. Space.
You put an easement on it, and then you offset their taxes for that piece.
Yeah, something, and then you could even at that point, you could even, if you had any records further about where it actually was, you could perhaps delineate it, like the way the hermit's grave is delineated. But that might be going overboard. But anyways, I just got triggered by Brian talking about how. And thinking about how it isn't even protected, and we're lucky maybe that it's in the state it is and not in someone's basement right now.
Well, I would say I walk past that pretty regularly, almost every day. And I have noticed that the people who own the home have actually made that area more accessible for themselves. There's a walking path down there. They now have a bench down there. So I think a parent would be sitting while the kids are playing by the brook there. I think at some point, either the village or your committee may want to reach out, if you haven't already reached out to this family, to let them know what they're playing on. I'm not sure if they've made that improvement. I think they just think it's great to be that close to the brook. But it is something, if we're going to, communicate about an easement or something of that nature, that may be a village, job, or if just as part of your research, Sarah and Kathy, you may want to let the family know what they have if they don't already know.
Can I sort of ask like a novice question? I mean, I visited a lot of historical sites in the South, and churches and Underground Railroad sites that had sort of a raised sign, which is, sort of a pole with a plaque on it. I mean, I don't know that. Presumably the village owns the sidewalk, I assume. That's my novice question.
Yes, that's probably correct.
Right. So, I would think that with respect to that, there could be a raised, I see them all over the South, and we visited with my family many sites, including some African burial grounds and underground railroad sites that don't exist anymore. And so there's just a commemorative raised plaque, right? So that, that I don't know how complicated that is, or
Probably.
sort of inviting like the whole politics of a family that lives on that
That's
ground.
probably a lot easier than building it into the wall itself, actually. To have a sign plaque.
Yeah, like in front of Lowaro, there's that blue sign. It's like the
Yeah.
vintage.
I'm thinking like so that when you see it, it has prominence, because it's not sort of,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
to
think
sort of avoid the politics of the family and telling them, whatever, or that seems to be complicated.
yeah.
So
Well, this is,
go ahead, Mark. What?
I don't know. I was going to say that we do own the space, that we own a triangle of space that is between the wall and the sidewalk, if I remember correctly, because we used it at one point to create a little plaza area, and at one point there was some plantings in that area that the village controlled. So it'd be very easy to make put a signpost with a historic marker in place.
Mhm.
So we don't have to decide now, I'm sure many of us would volunteer to be involved. We can, Sarah, you're the person we should be in touch with?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And
Yeah, I'll coordinate that.
yeah, good. Oh, yes.
Thanks, Larry.
Before we leave, if that's what's happening, I just wanted to make a kind of a small note about timing, which is that I hear all of the trustees' concerns about getting this right, and that it's going to take time to figure that out, and that even before we reconvene again, there have to be conversations amongst yourselves, which makes total sense that there's no decision being made today. But I would say, even though history will always be history, that we are in a particular moment, both in the village and in the world. In the village, we're at a moment where the sidewalk plaques that are highlighting the lives of the Irvington citizens whose names appear on our street signs are going to be installed later this summer. And we know now that—
Necessarily, we haven't decided that.
No, we haven't. We didn't approve those either.
That isn't a done deal. No.
that's
It's not done.
saying this should be
Yeah,
part
these
of
are
the
part of these ongoing things. They're not. That's
Okay.
not a done deal.
Okay, so I don't know what the timing of that is, but I think these things are related in time.
Yes, absolutely. And that's
So,
before, that this should be considered along with these other projects to make sure that we have some sort of coherent vision and execution.
And and then I think the final piece, which is related to tying them all together and making sure we have them laid out well, is, kind of the, for the last couple of years, we've been talking about how to honor Madam C.J. Walker. So, part of that for me was going to be in front of my original plan was in front of Village Hall as well. So, we don't want it to get too busy either. And, then is it, all the African-American things just going to be right in front of Village Hall? Like, I think we kind of look at this kind of holistically, we can kind of, I think figure it out, which is the good thing is, like, when we first started talking about this, we weren't aware of the kind of the street name project. So it's kind of nice that we're kind of getting them all together so we can kind of figure out the best way to tie them all together. And so they're not, just even different fonts and different types of, whatever. So it can actually look like it was thought out and planned as opposed to just slapped together.
Right.
So the other thought that I had related to timing, understanding now that this is not definitely happening this summer, is that, as the rally showed, and as we all know, because we're reading and watching, we are in a particular historical moment in this country and around the world with Black Lives Matter. And so one thought that I had, I don't know if this would be really unusual, but as these discussions amongst yourselves and with members of our committee proceed over the next couple of months, even if there's anything that is agreed to, even something as general as what is agreed to today about the need to commemorate, I wonder if that could be something that could be a statement that is put out from Brian or from the village trustees to the community saying, we recognize this moment. Nothing happens overnight. We're debating how exactly and where. And in any case, you know, Vinny would take a year to do the sculpture, even if when it's approved. So we know nothing is going up soon. But if there could just be kind of a statement of commitment that dovetails with this particular moment and the urgency that people in Irvington feel to move forward on issues of equity and inclusion and historical representation, I think that would be very meaningful to a lot of people. And it could be, you know, very broad strokes, I think. But just to be of a piece with this moment. Sorry, Arlene.
We could think about that. We've done that, you know, a general statement that, you know, we share and try to get out. So, I mean, I don't want to presume, but my understanding was from everybody that there is commitment to recognize the enslaved Africans in Irvington in some way. I mean, I think that there is a commitment to in some way. It's just the details of it. So if that's important, maybe we can work on that sooner rather than later, Lisa.
Well, I just want to say on Friday, June 19th is Juneteenth.
Yes, right. I know about Juneteenth. Yeah.
Do you know, Sarah, when you expect the text, you said the text was under development. When do you expect that to be ready?
Oh, we could be finished with that in a matter of a few weeks.
By Juneteenth? I was thinking it would be a perfect kind of PR, like this is going to be the basis of the kind of commemoration we're planning. You know, some kind of it gives it one step more solidity, I guess I'd say.
Then you have the wording, there are two wordings too, you know, there's the place here and anyway, I don't know, you know, it's this or that.
Well, if we could have even a solid draft by then, we wouldn't have to commit to bronzing it. You know, we could maybe have like, here's our draft of what we believe is going to be the, you know, the wording on the plaques. So, I mean, I think we could probably get something to work.
Well, definitely sharing it with, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, just in terms of the wording, for the sidewalk plaques for the families, which I think were slave owning families, right? I think from your presentation, Sarah, is that, you know, sort of, I think when we think about Irvington history and this moment in time and sort of like tying all these pieces together, is that wording for those plaques? I'm sorry, because I'm new to this. I don't know how far along that is, or if that history is going to be taken into account.
The wording on those, I mean, that was, again, kind of like your situation. Those were proposed to us. We didn't, you know, outright say those 7 sentences are what we're committed to. I think we're, in general, committed to the idea of it, but it didn't get that far. So it's less far along than I think.
Is that language
in the ether?
Is that language available?
Oh yeah, it was a part of a work session, so I'm sure it's on the agenda.
Yeah, I think it was attached to the agenda.
Okay.
Larry, maybe you could
I
circulate.
can email it around, sure.
One of the concerns I had, just as an aside, was, you know, not only where the placement of those plaques would go, but they were very wordy.
Yeah, it was too.
And I'm not sure that people are going to stand on the sidewalk and read 2 paragraphs of text. I just don't know if that was serving the purpose they thought it was.
So yeah, it was. I mean, I appreciate the same way. I mean, there was a lot of work that Earl did and others on Earl Ferguson, I think, on that project, and I think it's still in consideration as you know, in terms of how it manifests itself. I think we like the idea of explaining those street names of who they were, but it's not as far as.
Honestly, I don't even remember if there was any explanation or, you know, higher level critique of them as slave owners, you know, and if not, I think your point is well taken, that, you know, somehow those messages need to be tied together and not just free floating.
Well, I would say
We can provide the names, the actual names of the human beings that each one of those families owned.
well, you know, I would comment that, you know, one of the things I was pleased to see is that your group is in contact with Paul Ficalora, and he's the one who's presenting these plaques. So,
Yeah.
It seems easy enough for you guys to connect together with them and to come up with something that you might all agree with, and then present to us, and maybe we'd be killing two birds with one stone, an agreement
Right.
on what's going to be in the street corners and what's going to be in the locations honoring the enslaved Africans.
Yeah, I mean, I agree totally that, although I don't remember the text now because I skimmed them through a couple of weeks ago, but the context now is in culture has changed significantly over the last month, and I think we have to ensure that the Plaque's messaging doesn't become an artifact of a long gone era, but is an artifact of today's public awareness.
I do think I'll put in one other comment. I had a couple people came to me and said, "This is fascinating," and I said, "Yeah, I was like 12 before I realized that there were slaves in the North." And they said, "No, you don't understand. There were slaves in Irvington," and Irvington was founded in 1872, which was after the Civil War. I can't believe that. Like, what a scandal! And I'm like, guys, you're not reading it all. This was in historic Irvington from 14 or 1500 on, not necessarily in Irvington after it was renamed. So I think there's half a line in there somewhere saying that it was even before Dearman or whatever. It's kind of like it's in historic Irvington, not in incorporated Irvington or whatever. Because I think people were like, "Why isn't this on the news?" kind of thing. It was so it was like it was. And I think it was because it was such a compelling story when you read these things too, that because it was great that you were able to humanize it so much with actual names. So again, hats off for all the great research that made this really come to life. I mean, I guess working at the restoration so long, it's second nature to you, but you obviously know the importance of that. And when you personalize things, and I think that's why place is so important when you think about. I can't walk by that area down on South Buckeye now without thinking about it. It's just so powerful, and it's and that's without any kind of commemoration or story or anything. Putting names there is, I think it'll make it just even that much more powerful. So.
All right, to be continued. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
So I think next steps, Larry, maybe we can follow up with Sarah and get a subcommittee so we can kind of move quickly on this, so we're not waiting another month to kind of get the ball rolling. And maybe we can be in a place to have, Vinny come up before, the end of the summer anyway. I mean, that kind of be my goal, because who knows her schedule, and, our schedules get tight in July and August as well. We have limited meetings in July and August as well. Although I think the Zoom meetings aren't going to be much longer, Larry. I was going to say it'd be easy to hop on a meeting, but it looks like we're only allowed through July now, right? So
As of now, July 6th, but I mean, who knows?
Let's watch the curves.
Yeah.
It keeps changing, so who knows? But
it's always, in some ways, it's so easy just to jump on a meeting like this that it might be easier to schedule. We could even do it on an off night or something, because it's like it could be a special meeting of the board or something. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
all right.
Well, thank you again, folks, for meeting with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.